11. And do any of you remember Sir Alan Cobham's Flying Circus? Yes, Alan Cobham was a well-known aviator, and he toured the world. And I remember going with my mum by tram. We didn't have a car then, to the old airfield, which is near the football stadium in Durban. And for 5 shillings we had a ride up in the 3 of us. And I think that was Guy's first exposure to flight. But he said, and particularly I think working at Barclays Bank in Westgate in Durban was soul destroying for him. And I think he must have said, isn't there more to life?
Yeah. Because he did quite a lot of sailing, didn't he?
Yes, I should have mentioned that too. We had a holiday home at Salisbury Island in Durban. It's no longer an island, it's now a naval base. My dad, fortunately, was advised that he was doing too much desk work as a lawyer and later as a judge. He should do something with his hands. And he decided to build canoes. We all had our own canoe, we all helped him build them, and later we graduated to sailing. But again, Guy was always there when to help me. And Dad got over-ambitious, put on too much sail on his yachts, and brokey, they called us, I called this brokey's way, that was a generic name. When he capsized, there'd be a cry, the island was small, brokey! Old man's plopped again. And whoever was near it, Guy or Paul or I, would have to swim out and help him get right.
So there was no sense of foul play about your brother's disappearance?
No sense of?
Foul play? Nobody pushed him over, no political motive, nothing of that kind?
No. And no question of suicide. I mean, that's... Or
and even the colic thing is a bit questionable, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean, it is a mystery.
The medic said that Guy had complained of some stomach pains and said, well look, we'll be in Durban in 5 days' time, we'll get you properly checked out. And I think the most likely explanation is that he tottered on the low deck, the low railing, and simply fell in. And of course no one would hear him.
And in fact, he was, I mean, the boat was going quite fast, wasn't it? And it was night.
Yes. And they did recover one skewer from Norway, which is now in the Fleet Air Arm Museum. It's a relic. They put it together, and I saw that, and that was quite a thrill to see that. His plane. He flew swordfish and gladiators, and they mentioned it in the book, but I think the skewer was his favourite.
As he talks about it as though that plane was a real friend almost.
And when he crash landed in the Mediterranean near the destroyer, and the destroyer was going to come and sink his plane, but he said, I won't bother to look up the exact words, something that she was always a lady and she disappeared before the destroyer sank her. She sank herself.
Brokey, Guy's grandchildren and great-grandchildren, what sort of careers have they followed?
Oh, quite ordinary ones. Emma, the girl, is the only one who went to college. They all make good livings and unglamorous jobs. One is a heavy-duty truck driver, another one lays carpets, one puts in fences, and he's booked 2 or 3 years ahead. So they're all doing that, and some of the grandchildren are working at Dounreay, which is they're decommissioning the nuclear power plant, which is near Wick, which is a 20-year job, and 2 of them are scientists who've got jobs there. So of course they only know Guy as a sort of family legend, as one does.
Yes. Now they'll put flesh on the...
I hope, yes.
Oh, they will, there's no doubt. Yes. There's at the back of the book, there's a couple of appendices, and one of them gives all these great-great-grandchildren and stuff, and yes, and you implied that, I mean, they're all boys except for the baby generation, the great-great.
The grand.
But they're all
Most of them are boys.
and this evidently.
But it was such a different war, this is something I should have mentioned, that when they shot down German pilots, they would find out how were they doing, were they all right? You know, as I said, the fact that the one came over to London to see. I asked Halvor, my Norwegian friend, what had happened to the crew of one of the Heikels that the guy shot down. And I think 3 survived, 1 was killed, and 1 had been a prisoner of war in Canada for 7 years, but was still alive. And I thought of contacting him, but what would I say? I'm the son of the guy who shot you down. and Halvor said he just didn't talk about the war. And as I say, for me, talking about the war now, something else I now have time to mention. Part of my problem was not only was I not a hero, but what in the Anglo-Boer War they called a Hansopper. I was a prisoner of war. I was surrendered. And I didn't want to be a Hansopper, I wanted to be a hero. And for years I wouldn't talk about being a prisoner of war. In fact, the first argument I had with my partner Bernard, he'd known me about 6 months, and my mother was staying with me in Tanganyika, and she mentioned when David was a prisoner of war, and he was quite angry and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" But it was buried down.
Joanne?
David, has Margaret received her copies and have you had
Yes,
any
I just
feedback?
had an email today. From the-
Joanne and I have been waiting and waiting too. And Berkey got quite cross of why you keep asking me that.
Because it's the kind of deadline that you can't do much about.
Exactly.
That's why.
No, just because she's 97 and things happen.
Yes.
No, Margaret was very encouraging with me, and I phoned her a few months ago to get some details, and she's bright and articulate and encouraging. She's a wonderful